All right, so are you ready for a deep dive that's a little different from our usual material?
Oh,
Yeah, we've got a listener, who's on a mission to decode the mysteries of attraction.
okay.
They want to know if somebody's thinking about them.
Mm-hmm.
And they brought us a stack of, let's call it relationship intel articles to help us figure it out.
So we're venturing into the fascinating realm of human behavior and romantic psychology.
Exactly. And our main source today is an article called Signs She's Thinking About You Nonstop.
Okay.
Now, I know this isn't exactly like a peer-reviewed, scientific journal,
Right.
but sometimes real-life questions spark the most interesting conversations.
Yeah, for sure.
And what we're aiming for here is to extract some genuine insight, not just relationship gossip.
I think that's a fantastic approach. Even in seemingly lighthearted topics, we can uncover valuable insights into psychology and human interaction.
So the article presents 10 telltale signs to watch out for,
Okay.
each one designed to reveal if she's got you on her mind.
Okay.
They range from subtle cues to more overt actions, and I have to admit some of them are pretty intriguing.
Let's hear them. I'm curious to see what this relationship intel suggests.
Well, it starts with a classic she searches for you in a room scenario.
Okay.
You're at a party, she
Yeah.
walks in,
Uh-huh.
and even if there's a whole crowd of people, her eyes are scanning, looking for you.
Interesting from a psychological perspective, there's definitely something to be said for visual attention. We tend to focus on what we find interesting or appealing, and that includes people.
Yeah.
But I'm also curious about how the article differentiates a simple glance from a more intentional search.
Good point. The article emphasizes that a search implies a deeper level of interest,
Okay.
a subconscious desire to locate you amidst the chaos. It's not just a casual glance, it's an active pursuit.
That's where things get a bit tricky. While visual attention can be a sign of interest,
Right.
it's crucial to consider the context.
Yeah.
Maybe she's looking for someone else entirely, or perhaps she's just trying to get her bearings in a new environment.
So we can't jump to conclusions based on a single glance.
Right.
What about those lightning-fast text replies?
Oh.
The article practically guarantees that if she's thinking about you nonstop,
Uh-huh.
her thumbs will be working overtime,
Okay.
firing off responses faster than you can hit send.
Ha, the digital age's love language response time.
Right.
While I can see how prompt replies might indicate interest, I'm hesitant to generalize.
Yeah.
People have lives, jobs, commitments. We can't always be glued to our phones, even if someone fascinating is messaging us.
But the article suggests that those delayed responses are a telltale sign of disinterest, a clear indication that she's just not that into you.
I'd argue that's a bit of a stretch. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. I mean,
There are countless reasons why someone might take a while to respond,
for sure.
and it's not always a reflection of their level of attraction.
You're absolutely right.
Right.
Maybe she's in a meeting, or perhaps she's simply someone who takes their time crafting thoughtful responses.
Right.
It seems we need to consider individual communication styles and personality differences before jumping to conclusion about those text timestamps.
Precisely. It's about comparing her texting behavior with you to her usual patterns, not some universal standard of response time.
Okay, so maybe rapid-fire replies aren't the ultimate confirmation of her affections?
Right.
What about physical nervousness?
Okay.
The article claims that if she seems jittery, fidgety, or awkward in your presence,
Uh-huh.
it could be a sign that she's feeling the heat of your undeniable charm.
Now, this is where we start venturing into the fascinating realm of nonverbal communication.
Right.
Our bodies often reveal more than we realize, and nervousness can definitely be a sign of attraction.
The article describes it as this almost involuntary reaction.
Yeah.
Like she's so preoccupied with making a good impression that her nerves get the best of her.
From a psychological standpoint, that makes sense.
Okay.
When we're attracted to someone, our nervous system goes into overdrive. We become self-conscious, worried about saying or doing the wrong thing. It's that classic fight or flight response. But in this case, it might manifest as blushing, fidgeting, or even stumbling over our words.
So those awkward moments could actually be a good sign. Who knew?
Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. It's important to remember that everyone experiences and expresses nervousness differently.
Yeah, that's true.
Some people might clam up entirely while others become overly talkative.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
So how do we distinguish between general awkwardness and the I'm totally into you kind of awkwardness?
Context is key.
Okay.
Observe her behavior in other social situations.
All right.
Is she generally shy, or is this a noticeable shift when she's around you? Look for those subtle cues.
Okay.
Does she make eye contact? Does she lean in when you're talking? Does she maybe playfully touch your arm?
Interesting.
These nonverbal signals can offer valuable insights.
Okay, so we're not just looking for nervousness and isolation.
Right.
We're looking for a pattern of behavior that suggests a heightened level of interest, specifically when she's interacting with you.
Exactly. And that brings us to another fascinating sign, dropping hints about future engagements.
Okay.
The article suggests that any mention of free time is a surefire sign that she's dying to hang out.
It paints this picture of her subtly, or maybe not so subtly, planting seeds, hoping you'll pick up on her availability and suggest a date.
That's an interesting interpretation. I'd say it's important to differentiate between simply mentioning free time
Right.
and actively suggesting shared activities.
Okay.
People talk about their schedules all the time. It's part of everyday conversation.
The article provides examples like, I'm free tomorrow night, or I don't have many plans this weekend, as potential hints.
Those are open-ended statements, invitations for further discussion,
Okay.
but not necessarily declarations of romantic intent.
Gotcha.
Now, if she follows up with something more direct, like,
Yeah.
we should grab coffee tomorrow, or maybe we could check out that new exhibit this weekend, that's a stronger indication.
So it's not just about mentioning free time. It's about proactively suggesting shared experiences, right?
Precisely. And pay attention to her tone of voice, her body language.
Okay.
Is she genuinely enthusiastic about the prospect of spending time with you, or is she just being polite?
This is making me realize how much nuance there is to all of this.
Yeah.
It's not just a checklist of behaviors. It's about reading between the lines, understanding the context, and considering all the factors involved.
You're absolutely right. We're not just decoding secret messages. We're trying to gain a deeper understanding of human behavior, and that requires a more holistic approach.
Speaking of holistic approaches, what about the concept of physical closeness?
Oh.
The article claims that if she's constantly finding ways to be near you, leaning in, bridging that personal space gap,
Yeah.
it's a subconscious sign of attraction.
Proxemics, the study of personal space. This is fascinating territory.
Yeah.
We humans have these invisible bubbles around us, and the closer someone is allowed into that bubble, the greater the level of trust and comfort.
The article describes it as this gradual inching closer, maybe starting a conversation at a distance, and then subtly moving closer as the interaction progresses.
That's a classic example of subconscious attraction.
Right.
We tend to gravitate towards people we find appealing. It's almost instinctive.
Yeah.
However, it's also important to consider cultural norms.
Oh, okay.
Some cultures are more comfortable with physical touch and closeness than others.
So we need to factor in her cultural background as well.
Yeah.
What might be a clear sign of interest in one culture could be completely innocuous in another.
Absolutely. And we can't forget about individual personality differences.
Oh, right.
Some people are naturally more touchy-feely than others, regardless of their romantic intentions.
So sort of like in context is everything.
Exactly.
We can't just assume that any close proximity is a green light.
Right.
We need to consider her cultural norms, her usual interaction style, and the overall context of the situation.
Exactly. It's about looking for patterns.
Okay.
Consistent behaviors that suggest a genuine desire to be closer to you.
All right, so far we've explored the she searches for you in a room idea. The speed of text replies, the potential significance of nervousness, those hints about future plans, and the concept of physical closeness. Before we move on to the rest of the signs, I want to pause for a moment and ask you, dear listener, what's standing out to you so far?
Yeah.
Which of these signs seems most believable and which ones seem like a bit of a stretch?
It's fascinating to consider how these signs might play out in real-life scenarios and how our own perceptions and biases might influence our interpretations.
We'll dive into that more in a bit, but first let's explore the remaining 5 signs on the list.
Okay.
Trust me, things are about to get even more interesting.
All right, so let's get back to those potential signs.
Okay.
Next on the list is a behavior that might seem like a pretty clear indicator of interest.
Okay.
Asking about your relationship status.
This one feels like a bit of a no-brainer.
Yeah.
I mean, if she's constantly asking if you're single, surely that's a strong sign she's interested, right?
On the surface, yes.
Yeah.
It would seem someone wouldn't be so invested in your availability unless they had a personal interest.
The article suggests she's basically scoping out the situation, trying to figure out if she has a shot.
That's one way to look at it.
Yeah.
From an evolutionary psychology perspective, it makes sense.
Really?
We're wired to seek out partners, and that often involves assessing the competition.
So it's not just idle curiosity. She's gathering intel, strategizing her next move.
Perhaps. But remember, context is key.
Right.
Maybe she's just making conversation. Or perhaps she's asking on behalf of a friend who has a crush on you.
That's a good point. I hadn't considered that angle.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like we can't always take those relationship status inquiries at face value. There might be more to the story than meets the eye.
Exactly. It's a good reminder to consider alternative explanations before jumping to conclusions. Now, what about the next sign on our list? Playful teasing.
Ah, yes, the classic she's always picking on me scenario.
Uh-huh.
The article claims that if she's constantly poking fun at you,
Right.
it's a sure sign she's smitten. But honestly, I'm a little skeptical about this one.
I understand your skepticism. While playful teasing can be a form of flirting,
Yeah.
it's a complex dynamic. We need to consider the nature of the teasing, the context, and individual personalities.
The article suggests that women use teasing as a way to express affection without being too direct.
Okay.
It's like a subtle form of flirtation, a way to test the waters without being too vulnerable.
There's definitely some truth to that.
Okay?
Humor can be a powerful tool for building rapport and creating a sense of intimacy.
Yeah.
When we tease someone, we're essentially inviting them to engage in a playful exchange to show us their sense of humor and their ability to take a joke.
So it's not just about the teasing itself, it's about the reaction it elicits, the back and forth banter that it sparks.
Exactly. It's a way of assessing compatibility, seeing if you can both navigate that delicate dance of humor and connection.
But how do we know if it's harmless flirtation or if it's crossing the line into something hurtful or disrespectful?
That's a crucial distinction. Playful teasing should always be good-natured, lighthearted, and respectful.
Okay.
If it starts to feel mean-spirited, demeaning, or if it consistently targets insecurities, that's a red flag.
So we need to pay attention to her tone of voice, her body language, and the overall vibe of the interaction. If it feels off, it probably is.
Exactly. Trust your instincts. And remember, communication is key. If something feels uncomfortable, don't hesitate to express your feelings or distance yourself from the situation. Now, moving on, the article also highlights the significance of personal information.
Okay.
It claims that if she's confiding in you, sharing intimate details about her life,
Yeah.
it's a sign that she sees you as someone special.
That makes sense to me. We tend to be more guarded with people we don't know well, and we're more likely to open up to those we trust and feel a connection with.
Absolutely. Self-disclosure is a fundamental aspect of building intimacy. When we share personal information with someone, we're essentially inviting them into our inner world,
Right.
making ourselves vulnerable.
Yeah.
It's a sign of trust and a desire for deeper connection.
The article suggests that women are more likely to open up to someone they're romantically interested in, someone they see a potential future with. It's like they're giving you a glimpse behind the curtain, revealing their true selves.
That's an interesting point. When we're attracted to someone, we naturally want them to know us on a deeper level. We
Right.
want to share our thoughts, our dreams, our vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
But we also need to remember that self-disclosure is a key component of friendship as well.
So how do we distinguish between friendly confiding and something more romantically charged?
It's about looking for patterns and paying attention to the nature of the information she's sharing.
Okay.
Is it surface level stuff like her daily routine or her favorite TV shows?
Uh,
Or is she sharing more personal, vulnerable information about her past, her fears, her hopes for the future?
I see. The level of intimacy of the information shared can provide clues about the level of intimacy she's seeking in the relationship.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of nonverbal cues. Pay attention to her body language, her tone of voice, her overall demeanor when she is confiding in you. Does she seem nervous or hesitant?
Yeah.
Or does she seem comfortable and relaxed, as if she trusts you implicitly?
It seems like we're constantly being reminded that it's not just about the words themselves.
Right.
It's about the subtle cues that accompany those words, the unspoken messages that reveal her true feelings.
Precisely. It's like learning to read a secret language, the language of human connection. Speaking of connection, the last sign on our list is all about effort. Rearranging schedules, going out of her way to spend time with you.
Ah, yes. The grand gesture of time and commitment. The article makes it sound like if she's constantly moving mountains to be with you,
Yeah.
it's a sure sign she's head over heels.
I think it's important to acknowledge that actions often speak louder than words.
Uh-huh.
Time is a precious resource, and when someone willingly gives you theirs,
It's a powerful sign of their regard for you.
The article claims that if she's constantly making these kinds of sacrifices, canceling plans, rearranging her schedule,
Yeah.
it's because she simply can't get enough of you.
That's a romantic notion, isn't it? And while it's certainly possible,
Yeah,
it's also essential to consider other factors.
you're right. It's easy to get caught up in the excitement of those grand gestures, but we need to be realistic. Maybe she's just a really good friend who's always there for the people she cares about. Or maybe she's simply someone who's very generous with her time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about looking at the bigger picture, assessing the frequency and magnitude of her efforts. Is this a consistent pattern of behavior?
Yeah.
Or is it a one-time occurrence? Is she making significant sacrifices? Or is it just a minor inconvenience?
Those are all important questions to ask. It seems like we need to be careful not to read too much into every gesture, every sacrifice. There might be other explanations that have nothing to do with romantic interests. Absolutely. It's all about finding that balance between recognizing potential signs of interest and maintaining a healthy dose of skepticism.
Right.
We don't want to jump to conclusions or get carried away by wishful thinking.
I think that's a valuable takeaway for our listener.
Yeah.
It's great to be aware of these potential signs, but it's equally important to avoid overanalyzing every interaction, every text message, every glance.
Well said. It's about finding that sweet spot between observation and interpretation, between reading the signs and respecting the complexity of human behavior.
So we've explored all 10 signs, delved into the psychology behind them, and added a healthy dose of real-world context.
Yeah.
What's the key takeaway here? What do we want our listener to walk away with?
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive,
Oh, yeah.
exploring those 10 potential signs from the article.
Right.
But as we've discussed,
Yeah.
it's not just a simple checklist.
Cool.
It's about understanding the bigger picture
Yes.
and, most importantly, being aware of our own biases. You've hit the nail on the head. It's incredibly easy to fall into the trap of confirmation bias,
Oh, yeah.
especially when we're dealing with matters of the heart.
Confirmation bias.
Yeah.
Refresh my memory on that one.
It's our natural tendency to favor information that confirms our existing beliefs,
Okay.
even if those beliefs aren't entirely grounded in reality.
Uh-huh.
So if our listener is already convinced this woman is interested,
Right.
they might be more likely to interpret her actions through that lens, even if there are other perfectly valid explanations.
Ah. So they might overemphasize the time she laughs at their jokes
Yeah.
or downplay the time she mentions having a boyfriend.
Exactly. And that's why it's so crucial to be mindful of our own biases,
Right.
to actively seek out alternative perspectives,
Yeah.
and to be open to the possibility that we might be misreading the situation.
So how do we strike that balance? How do we stay objective when our emotions are pulling us in a certain direction?
It's not easy, but self-awareness is key.
Okay.
Ask yourself, am I seeing what I want to see? Or am I seeing the situation clearly? It can also be helpful to talk it through with a trusted friend,
Yeah.
someone who can offer an outside perspective and challenge your assumptions.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Sometimes a fresh pair of eyes can help us see things more objectively.
Right.
So while this deep dive started with a playful look at those 10 signs she's thinking about you,
Right.
we've ended up exploring some pretty profound aspects of human behavior,
We have.
communication, and the complexities of relationships.
And let's not forget the most important takeaway of all, the power of open and honest communication.
Yes.
As tempting as it is to try and decipher secret signs and hidden messages,
Uh-huh.
the most effective way to know what someone is thinking is to simply ask.
Easier said than done, right?
Oh, for sure.
But I think that's a perfect note to end on.
Yeah,
Ultimately, clear communication is the foundation of any strong relationship,
absolutely.
whether it's romantic or platonic.
Absolutely. And who knows, maybe that's a topic for a future deep dive.
I'd love to explore that further. But for now, let's leave our listener with this final thought-provoking question. This source focused on her actions,
Yeah.
but what about yours? How do you signal interest? What messages are you sending out into the world?
That's a fantastic point. It's a two-way street after all. Relationships are a dance, a delicate interplay of actions, reactions, and unspoken cues.
So, dear listener, as you continue to navigate the fascinating world of human connection, remember to be observant.
Be open-minded.
Be honest with yourself.
Yes.
And most importantly, be brave enough to communicate your feelings directly.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this intriguing deep dive. It's been a pleasure exploring the nuances of attraction with you both.
The pleasure was all mine. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey of discovery. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into a topic that's sure to spark your curiosity and expand your understanding of the world around us. Until then, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those deep dives going.